Hello, friends. The New Year holidays have already passed, but don't be upset, there are still many holidays and weekends ahead, and we are starting a new story. Let's go. The story begins with the fact that the girl was completely immobilized. Her limbs were tied to the iron table and could not help her get out, and a gag was stuck in her mouth so that she could not speak. The heroine's throat was also chained, so every unnecessary movement led to difficulty breathing and terrible pain. Meanwhile, the doctors only observed their ward and made certain conclusions about her behavior, and the head warden and his team of guards stood aside and discussed the new technology they were to use. Recently, the Astrodome Company bred a new kind of insect, and according to their promises, the creature should confuse the minds of demons. One of the doctors took it upon myself to demonstrate the possible development of events, so he unlocked the suitcase, which still contained a living organism. And its bearer was to be a girl who was chained to an iron couch. The supervisor's eyes seemed to light up with the desire to see the expected result, so he gave the order to begin. After that, the doctor took a flask with an insect in his hands and directed it to the oral cavity of their ward. Immediately after the creature entered her body, strange actions began to occur. Her pupils instantly shrunk and her skin changed color. From the pain she felt, her body began to shake convulsively in an attempt to leave the iron shackles. However, this reaction did not last long, because soon the exhausted body seemed to stick out, and the researchers got the desired result. After that, the warder became curious about what their subject could say to them now, so he ordered her to open her mouth. The doctor immediately opened the iron gag and allowed the girl to speak. The demoness began to whisper something and tried to breathe normally. The chief researcher did not hear what she was trying to say, so he leaned closer and questioned her. Suddenly, the girl's eyes began to change again, and her consciousness gained more and more aggression. After that, she rushed at the doctor and clung to his neck with sharp teeth, biting him to the point of blood. Other doctors immediately tried to save their colleague, and in order to calm down the subject, they began to shock her with electricity. However, her bite seemed too strong, and as a result, the crippled man died instantly. Despite the fact that they tried to cut down the demoness with electricity, her body was not exposed to electrical influence. She craved death and revenge when she tasted human blood in her mouth. The chief warden understood that the girl was too strong, so in his opinion, she could hold a high position in the demon clan. So he ordered her to be locked up in an isolation cell and to proceed with Plan B. Meanwhile, a van was approaching the guarded area, in which another offender was being transported. He turned out to be a young guy who was thinking about how fate often brings terrible things to people, and he was no exception. The transport for the transportation of prisoners was securely fortified, and its specific passengers were bound to have gigantic handcuffs. However, this time the two people in the car were different, because besides the boy there was a real demon which visually resembled a bull. He asked the boy to show his true appearance, because he could not stand the way ordinary people visually look. But the young man looked at him with a desolate look and remained silent. Such an answer enraged the demon, and he began to rage on the whole car. The boy could not stand this noise and told that he had been imprisoned for robbing a human official. However, the demon did not support his action. He did not understand why the young man wanted a human life. They say that only weaklings go to people to make money from them and associate themselves with them. Nearby in the car were also representatives of monsters who agreed with his words. They say that an evil must look like a real evil in order to frighten with its appearance alone. Another demon was also present among them, who at first adhered to a human appearance, but under the influence of the majority, assumed his true form. And that big man continued to mock and read morals to the young man, saying that no matter how hard he tried to look like a human, the demon would still fall into a trap. After finishing his speech, the bull spat on the young man's shoes to humiliate him. The boy looked at it in silence and felt disgusted by how stupid the creatures around him were. They say that only by humiliating others they can satisfy their own pride. He said about the tattoo that was on the bull's neck, which was supposed to represent the glory of the holy war. The drawing implies the preservation of demonic traits, diet, and habits. However, despite its presence, he was still captured by people, so everyone present in the car was as if in the same boat. But the demon of the giants did not want to admit his own defeat and began to rage because of the words uttered by the young man. So in order to show his own superiority over all human beings, he rushed at the interlocutor with his fists. Pretty soon, the car with the prisoners drove up to the huge iron gates of the prison. The concentration camp was located on the closed island of the state of Xianwu, where the evil spirits were kept. This place was created for those who were there to rethink themselves and cleanse their souls. The weather was terrible in the yard that day, but Contactor Chief Zhao Xin still went out to meet the truck with a new batch of evil spirits. He was strictly dressed and always accompanied by a certain number of guards who were like servants for him. The man approached the car and immediately took out the list of prisoners, after which he ordered them to get out of the car. A young boy, who also had handcuffs on his legs, was the first to step out onto an unknown land for him. He gradually took one step at a time and inspected the territory of the concentration camp. There were 9 criminals in total, and by order of the management, they lined up in a line. Chief Zhao Xin looked at the list and counted the people present. There was some mistake, because 10 criminals were supposed to arrive. Then one of the guards decided to check the truck and found the 10th prisoner there. But there was one problem. It was the same bull demon, but his physical condition left much to be desired. He was so badly beaten that he couldn't even get out on his own. Then the chief turned to the other demons and asked whose hands it was. No one answered, so he began to approach each thief in turn and ask them personally. First he checked the demon, whose appearance resembled a nasty slug. But it wasn't him, so next was a demon whose skin was covered with scales. However, he could not stand such a stern look from the supervisor and pointed his finger at the boy standing last in line, saying that he had done it. Lana's answer satisfied the officer, so he adjusted his glasses and took an interest in the young man. The boy stood alone, and his appearance did not at all resemble someone who could beat such a big man. This was what Zhao Xin was most interested in, so he moved to the end of the line. Approaching the prisoner as close as possible, he immediately asked his name. Without further ado or hesitation, the boy introduced himself as Roland. Such cold-bloodedness pleased the chief, so he repeated the name of the criminal with a smile. After that, he emphasized that the young man was not like everyone else, but emphasized that he did not like bullies. And then he asked if Roland knew about the punishment for attacking another prisoner. But the boy replied that he acted solely in self-defense, so he did not intend to start a fight without reason. The man did not like such audacious behavior of criminals, so his view immediately changed. After a pause, he immediately hit the young man in the stomach with such force that he began to cough. While Roland was on his knees before the boss, he announced the first rule, according to which it was forbidden to contradict him. The boy's true demonic appearance began to appear from the blow he received. As soon as he showed his sharp teeth, the guards pointed their weapons at him to keep him in peace. After which, Zhao Sun made a small speech and said that from now on, all demons are his slaves, and anyone who will create general noise and problems, he will personally blow off his head. Then he looked at the list and read aloud Roland's case, where it was written that he was convicted of theft in Xi'an and received a life sentence. In addition, he was sentenced to 7 days in solitary confinement for an attack on another prisoner, so the sentence was immediately executed. As for the other demons, they began to be escorted to the cells by guards. And Zhao said in parting that the demons had better work obediently in this place and not think about anything else. Besides, now they can say goodbye to freedom. Finally, he mentioned Roland and added something else. As soon as the iron bars were opened, he kindly said, "Welcome to hell." The boy looked back to admire the scenery of a free life for the last time. But looking at the bright city, he understood that there was no way back. Under the cold rain, the prisoners walked the territory of the concentration camp, where armed guards were watching them from everywhere. Suddenly, the width of the prisoners stopped, and Chief Zhao ordered Roland to step forward. The boy kicked and tried not to get into the hands of the guards, but they immediately took out their weapons. They took the young man out of order, and with a smile Zhao sent him to the detention center, adding that it was his favorite place. Roland is big for a huge and lonely building that was well guarded and had strong doors. He walked with his head bowed, followed by Chief Zhao, who was happy for everyone who entered the detention center. Meanwhile, the other demons were whispering about the rumors that they only get out of the cell half dead, if at all. The building from the middle was all in red light, which created an eerie picture. As soon as the prisoner and the boss entered the elevator, the man immediately released his subordinates. The prison also had a large number of underground floors, so that the thieves had no chance of escape. Roland's cell was on the 9th floor, so he and his boss headed there. They drove in silence. The silence was alarming. However, the young man suddenly turned to Zhao. He told the man that they were left alone so he could finally breathe. After that, the chief really took a deep breath as if he had deflated like a balloon. The man began to laugh nervously and asked Roland, addressing him as if he were an agent, if he had done well in the role. He said that he started cooking as soon as he got a call from the secret intelligence agency. So I asked the young man, if possible, to order a word for him in the future. The man did not expect that the boy would dare to start a fight in order to get into the punishment cell, so he asked why he was sure that the big man would attack him. Roland replied that it was just a coincidence. He simply saw on the thief a tattoo of an extremist organization that stood for the glory of the demonic race. So he immediately decided to take advantage of the opportunity and sat down opposite him, guessing that he strongly hated relatives who did not show demonic traits. Zhao Xin listened to this story and became immensely proud of the young agent. After that, he bowed before him and apologized profusely for the fact that he had to hit the boy. Roland decided to check the condition of his hematoma, which he received from a strong punch to the stomach. A strange scar remained in that place, which visually resembled a large spider. Zhao said that he had previously heard from an acquaintance in the capital that it was 5th-generation technology. All scouts in the Kingdom of the Unclean had to pass through it. an operation to transplant a demonic origin extracted from captive demons. The rejection rate had dropped to 30%, but it was still dangerous. The man endlessly told everything he knew about it, but at one point the boy tried to stop him. It pissed him off that the boss was looking at his scar on the lower abdomen all the time and started touching it with his hands. Zhao apologized for not being able to hold back, but the agent was more concerned about their goal. He had already read all the information, but he still wanted to hear Jia Xin's version. The elevator took a long time to descend, so they had time to discuss all the nuances of the mission. The man told about a demon who was captured by secret intelligence and brought to him in prison. He didn't know the whole backstory, but he could definitely tell that he was this creature's one headache. Zhao added that it is better for Ronaldo to see everything for himself, but warned that the evil spirit is quite capricious. The guy was surprised by the last point, so he asked if he understood correctly. Soon they arrived at the underground 9th floor, so the boss warned the young agent to work carefully, because he was dancing on the tip of a sharp sword. He also added at the end that Xuan Yu's courage and strength are always with him. Ronald did not quite understand what these wishes were for, but there was no time left to find out. The corridor with the isolation cells looked rather gloomy. There were only green doors on each side. As soon as they left the elevator, they were met by security guards who immediately saluted their boss, Zhao. From all sides came the screams of terrible demons who were eager to be freed. For many years, the Xuan Yu human state and the Foul Kingdom hoped to completely destroy each other. To win the war, both sides planted large numbers of spies, and by a fortuitous coincidence, Ronald was forcibly recruited into the secret intelligence service of the Xuan Yu state. And after a long and painful training, the boy became one of the best spies. So now, as he walked down the hallway of the most terrifying concentration camp for demons, he remembered his story. He was promised a long time ago that if he succeeds in completing this task, he will be free and able to return to his family. Recently, he only thought about how he could become free and no longer participate in this terrible war. Having reached the end of the corridor, the chief chose a cell for him. He got into his role again and addressed Roland with a word, saying that he would hardly be able to survive 7 days in this room. The man opened a strong metal door for him from where soft snoring was already coming. The boy looked into the camera and identified his first goal. And to begin with, he needed to gain the trust of the person who was there. It was the same demon girl who was being experimented on to introduce a new insect. And in the meantime, Roland tried to remember the moment when humans and monsters started their feud. However, it was difficult to remember. The impure power was born with extraordinary power due to the demonic origin in their bodies. While humanity was almost wiped out, this continued until a wise man was born. He learned the art of acupuncture and mastered the hidden power. Since then, the human race has been given the opportunity to compete with evil, continuing to grow and develop, and later the state Xuan was built. Civilization has always strived for the complete destruction of each other, and the war has continued to this day, taking the lives of many. So the young spy was interested in one question, whether he would become the next victim after entering the kingdom of the unclean. However, while he was in the same cell with the imprisoned demoness, she was right in front of him. The girl's name was Bai Lin, and she was the first target. At first glance, the demonic creature looked weak, but the boy knew very well that it was very dangerous. This task was very important and lay on the young man's shoulders. But before proceeding to the implementation, he received information about the first goal. The main thing for Roland was to win the trust of the demoness, and thanks to her to penetrate into the kingdom of the unclean. 3 months ago, the girl killed one of their sect's diplomats, so intelligence found her and captured her. And according to the research, the object belongs to the clan of demonic foxes Qinchu, and its status was no longer low. So the young man was immediately warned that his aim was quite strong. Many good fighters were lost in attempts to catch her. So the level of this demoness A. So you need to pay attention to it and do not underestimate it. Management told Roland that a meeting with a girl would be arranged for him, so he needed to act according to the plan. So, as the last words, the chief asked the young man not to let them down in the name of the continuation of the human race. However, the boy was determined to do it for his own sake, and hoped that the promise from the chief would be restrained. Roland remembered everything as a terrible dream, and soon the voices of the guards of the concentration camp brought him back to reality. Chief Zhao entered the cell with him, emphasizing the unpleasant smell that reminded him of being on a farm. The boy looked around and asked the chief what kind of place it was, because it had little resemblance to a prison. And the senior explained that this is a test base, which was created specifically for their experiments. The young man's expression immediately changed, because he did not know such details. Bai Lin looked very tired and exhausted, as if she had really become part of a terrible experiment. The cold corridor of the isolation ward really resembled an underground laboratory where people conducted experiments on monsters. The men stood opposite the demoness, who shouted that they should not rejoice at their victory. The girl craved revenge for herself and her relatives, so she was sure that her race would return all evil to people many times stronger. Then Chief Zhao spoke to her and asked if the girl was aware of what she was saying. But the man did not like such harsh answers, so he said that he would teach this prisoner to obey him. After that, he put his hand on the lever, which was supposed to lift the girl into the air with iron chains. And he lowered his hand with the words that no one present in this concentration camp has the right to contradict him. After these words, the demoness immediately rose to the ceiling and remained in this position until the boss finished her punishment. Iron shackles squeezed her hands and brought considerable pain to the girl. But Zhao Xin was not going to leave so easily, but was eager to show the evil spirits that he should be respected. He gradually approached the girl and grabbed the battle club. However, it was not just rubber, but also conducted an electric current, which was specially made for punishment. So the man decided to teach the prisoner a lesson and hit her with an electric baton right under the chest. After that, he came even closer to her and grabbed her by the hair, as if evaluating the appearance of the demoness, who looked quite attractive. He examined her body and decided that the girl could agree to him in order to satisfy his own interests. However, Roland, who was standing next to him, did not like the boss's behavior. And while he continued to examine the body of the unclean woman in detail, asking her inappropriate questions, the young man decided that he needed to act. Gathering his strength, the young spy put his hand on the boss's arm, thereby stopping him. It was dangerous, as the man was in a state of aggression due to the demon's behavior. So his gaze immediately changed and he looked at Roland. But all this was a decision to make it easier for the young man to win the trust of the demoness. So he turned to the chief and said, "They say that people claim to represent reason and civilization, but they allow themselves to treat prisoners like this." Chief Zhao made an angry expression and asked if it was he who heard the threats directed at him now. But Roland replied that he didn't want the boss to have any more trouble and better stay away from demons, otherwise it might affect his future promotion. Bai Ling watched this conversation in silence. It was enough for her to be temporarily left alone. But the boy continued his speech, mentioning the high-ranking officials who would look down on the overseer who took joy in mocking the demons. So he threatened that this information could reach their ears. And as a result, Zhao could remain trapped in this for the rest of his life. And at that moment, the chief looked at the girl and realized that his act was really rash. Because if the officials of the capital find out about his flirting with demons, they will definitely not be happy about it, and you will see the end of his career. Then the man looked at Roland, who became very noble in his eyes. And despite his young age, he was not only well-versed in official matters, but also well able to bring people to their senses. So the man was sure of his boundless future. Bai Ling was still hanging there in the same silent way and looked at this conversation from under her forehead. Zhao thought carefully and said that the young man was right, but pointed at the demoness and repeated that she had gone against him, so he couldn't just let this act go. Rolando also thought about his future actions and made a decision. He said that if the boss still couldn't calm down, he was ready to take the brunt of the negativity on himself. The man looked at him and at first laughed, but then took action. With all his strength, he hit the boy on the neck with a club so that he could not stand on his feet. After such a blow, the boy immediately found himself on the floor of the cell writhing in pain, and Chief Zhao Xin was satisfied with his mighty swing. The prison guards also decided not to stand idly by and began kicking the boy wherever they could. Then they began to use wooden bats, with which they beat the young man on the stomach. And Bai Ling's face did not show any emotion of regret or gratitude that Roland had stood up for her. The boy was already losing consciousness from the blows he received and was bleeding. So when the guards and the warden were done, they threw the young man on the floor and left the cell. The room was closed with a strong metal door, in which there were only a few bars, through which you could see the corridor. Zhao Xin ordered his subordinates to keep a close eye on the boy, saying that he had already escaped from the northern prison. Meanwhile, Roland lay bruised and could hardly breathe after such blows. Suddenly, his inactivity caught Bai Lin's interest, so she asked him if he was alive. However, the answer was only silence and a soft moan, which accompanied heavy breathing. Then the demoness began to worry that her new neighbor had been beaten to death, so she immediately began to make excuses, saying that she could handle the boss herself. But the motionless body began to worry her even more, so she stretched out her leg and tried to carefully reach the boy. She begged him to come to his senses because she did not want to remain in debt to him. The girl pushed the young man in the head so that he would at least start to react somehow. Then she thought that she had remembered his name and began to insistently pronounce Roland. Suddenly the boy was able to open his eyes, but consciously he was not in reality. A bright flashlight shone in his face, as if he was being interrogated, and besides, he was tied up. The young man tried to cover his face from the bright light, but his hands were tied. Suddenly he heard a woman's voice saying that the person in question was a representative of the Xuanwu Secret State Intelligence Service. According to her, Roland was chosen as a secret agent for a special mission, and after the successful completion of the mission, the boy's past should be cancelled so he could start a new life. The tired young man listened to all this, and suddenly, somewhere behind him from the darkness, he heard the voice of his younger sister. Roland turned back, His eyes were frightened and his pupils narrowed greatly. He saw a little girl who reminded her of her birthday and asked to buy her a chocolate bar. Suddenly, out of the darkness, a terrible black hand began to approach the girl's shoulder. The boy immediately started shouting at Xiaomen to be careful and run away. However, this hand turned out to be the same woman who recently talked about a possible new life. But now she had new conditions. Roland had to carry out a mission to save the lives of his family members. Otherwise, they will all be killed because of him. After such a terrible nightmare, Roland still came to his senses and shouted to the whole camera. The girl was frightened by such an unexpected resurrection of her neighbor, so she jumped up in fear. The young man's head hurt terribly, but there was no way to apply anything cold, as even his hands were tied. Then he turned back to see a frightened Bai Ling, her hands chained up. Suddenly both of them felt ashamed, and an awkward silence passed. The demoness tried to calm him down, so she asked the young man if he had a bad dream that woke him up so suddenly, and he confirmed the girl's words with a downcast look, although this vision was far from a simple dream. Then he added that judging by the conditions in which they are, they cannot dream of anything good there, so it's time to get used to it. And after that, Roland emphasized that he was beaten because of the girl, so he asked her to at least introduce herself. But the demoness replied that she did not ask for help. For example, being beaten unconscious was a shame. He did not want to listen to all this, and added that if he had not intervened, the girl would have been dead a long time ago. She felt a little ashamed of her behavior, so she still gave her name and asked the young man to introduce himself to her. The boy called himself Roland and said that in this life he was nobody. However, the girl heard Chief Zhao say that the young man had escaped from another prison once before. And he confirmed these words, saying that the Green Island in the north had indeed escaped from the prison. However, unsuccessfully, as he was caught again. Bai Ling had heard about the Green Island before, and according to rumors it had pretty tight security. So she asked Roland how he managed to do it. The guy was playing well, and with a suspicious look, asked if his neighbor was really trying to squeeze information out of him in order to report it to the supervisor later. However, the girl was enraged by such slander as she was Hajan, which meant a warrior of the Qingchu clan. So she would never be in a conspiracy with a person, but would rather die. Roland began to analyze and remembered that Hazan is the highest rank of a warrior. The demoness acutely perceived the expression on Roland's face and ordered him to untie her, because she wanted revenge. They said she'd already killed many people, and if she hadn't been locked up in an isolation cell, she would have already destroyed the entire prison. The guy began to reassure her and said that he did not doubt her status at all. He was just a little wary, because he always thought that when a guy is locked up with a girl, it could be a conspiracy. So I began to suspect that the management wanted to make them doubt everything. But Bai Lin noticed that the boy was thinking too much, because people perceive them as a bunch of uncivilized animals, like pets. So they didn't care who to keep with whom. And then they asked again, whether in the Green Island they do not treat similar creatures in the same way. Ronald began to get a little confused in his testimony and, in order to get out of the situation cleanly, said that he was not locked up there with such beauties as Bai. Well, when it was all discussed, the young man had to show something important. The girl did not expect to see anything interesting, so she was meticulous. However, in a moment, her look changed, and she was clearly shocked by what she saw. The iron shackles that were on Ronald's hands instantly fell to the ground, freeing his limbs. Bai Lin immediately asked how her neighbor managed to do this and asked for help to free her. However, she had previously been sure that these handcuffs were specially designed for demons. Even with the power of the demonic initiation, they could not be broken. The boy laughed and said that it really wouldn't help, but a sharp pin would never be superfluous. He showed the girl a sharp metal needle closer, thanks to which he freed himself. Bai Lin immediately asked what it was, because I saw such a device for the first time. Roland explained that it was a special hacking thing that he had invented himself. She was versatile and suited for many things. Bai then asked if that was what the boy had used to open the lock while he was handcuffed. But the young man explained that their mechanism is not complicated. Usually, yes, the more high-tech, the easier, and in the Green Island, the castle was much more complicated and opened differently. And then there was the story about how Roland earned a living for many years by stealing from Zhuan. So many locks were broken with him. Then the girl immediately called the young man a thief, but he corrected himself and introduced himself as a master thief. After that, Bai had another question. How exactly did the boy manage to carry the iron object? Because he had to pass the detector. And for this occasion, he had a good story, which he immediately accepted to tell me. However, as it turned out, the young man managed to hide the iron pin with the lightness and dexterity of his own hands. So as soon as he closed his hands, the iron disappeared and only surprise appeared in Bi Ling's eyes. Roland decided to demonstrate where he had hidden the iron tool and reached out to the girl's face. She began to get angry and ordered him to remove his hand quickly, otherwise the limb would remain bitten. But Roland was not afraid of her and carefully pulled out his instrument from behind her ear. In the end, He told the girl not to worry because he took his own from her, after which he immediately received a question as to how he managed to do it so that Bai did not notice, and he explained that he simply focused her attention on his hands so that she did not have time to feel anything. At the moment when he spread his hands, there is one nuance. He can throw a sharp pin anywhere and it will not be visible to the eye. Then the girl asked if Roland really brought this device into the isolation ward, but he replied that first in front of the director he hid her from the guard. He then went through the detector and no contraband was detected, so he successfully slipped through. And then a guard passed by and imperceptibly returned his. However, Bai still wondered why the boy was so sure that the guard wouldn't check him. But he replied that he himself doubted this, so he threw the pin at the head of the prison. Bai Lin listened to everything and was most worried about what Roland was planning to do next. At first, the guy endured a pause in order to interest the girl even more. And then he gave her desired answer that of course he planned to get out of this damn place. And of course, after announcing his plans, the boy was asked how exactly he planned to escape. He took it as an insult, saying that he would not be able to escape. However, he reminded the girl that he managed to leave the Green Island, which was much more dangerous. Roland was not going to sit under the castle and be a guinea pig, so he thought it better to die while escaping. But Bai Lin was more interested in whether the boy had a specific plan. He replied that he needed a strong assistant to implement the plan, so he asked the girl if there were any large monsters with good cultivation among the prisoners. The demoness was immediately happy, and said that she was exactly the one who was needed as an assistant. The guy wanted to tease her a bit, so he tentatively asked if she was sure of her answer. At that moment, the girl became angry, and again ordered Roland to remove the shackles from her, after which she would demonstrate what it means to bear the title of Kazan. But considering that Bai Lin is from Qingchu, the young man had known about her power for a long time, but had not voiced it. He knew exactly what kind of monster he would unleash if he untied her. He didn't want to take any chances, as the demoness could kill him immediately after he removed her handcuffs. However, to act according to his secret plan, he had no other choice. Meanwhile, lightning was still striking outside and the weather was terrible. And the head of the prison held a telephone conversation, where he promised to organize people and observe absolute cooperation. He hung up the phone and was sure that the given task would be completed. After, he thought it all over and knew for sure that he should work together with Agent Roland. Then in the cell where the boy and the demoness were, terrible things began to happen. Since the girl was at large, the power she radiated had a specific purple color that filled the room. Feeling the taste of freedom, the demoness began to show her true form. Even through the sharp fur coats, smoke began to seep. Her eyes turned black and her ears perked up. The only thing she said was that she didn't expect how capable her neighbor would be. Roland was terribly frightened. He realized that Bai Lin was much scarier than what was written in the report. Then he felt the same depression that accompanied him when he met that woman from the Secret Service. The girl's behavior was as unpredictable as possible. Looking at the girl's actions, the boy came to the conclusion that the situation really got a little out of control. One thing bothered him more than anything. Although the Secret Service keeps everything under control, there is one thing that is simply impossible to control. Namely the demoness who smelled freedom and craved revenge. According to the intelligence, Bai Lin and others from the Qingchu clan had already been to the front line. Therefore, it is easier for someone who is in custody for the first time to gain trust. However, the girl's strength exceeded all Roland's expectations, and the girl's personality was difficult to decipher. He couldn't call himself a failure, or he wouldn't be left alone. The boy was always reminded that there was only one end waiting for loser dogs in the Secret Service. So for the sake of everything that was important to him, he had to step into the very core of the clan, and after that, he was to become the sharpest knife that would be thrust into the hearts of demons. Roland couldn't deviate from the plan, so everything would have to be under control. Suddenly, the demeanor's demeanor changed and she froze in place. However, immediately after that, she rushed at the boy with her whole body, which he definitely did not expect. She carefully extended her hand, which no longer looked human, to his chest. She was worried about not knowing who Roland was, what clan he was from, and where he mastered hacking skills so masterfully. At that moment, the boy realized that he should take advantage of the opportunity to transform and show himself as a real demon. So after his transformation, he revealed that he himself came from the Kanglin wolf clan living in the southwest and learned hacking from a master from Xuanyu. For example, the master died early, so he had to earn a living with this skill. The demoness wanted to make sure that the boy was telling her the truth, so she questioned him about the truth of the words. Roland immediately began to worry, because he was afraid of being caught in a lie and failing his mission by losing his family. The demoness felt that the young man's heart began to beat quite fast and nervously. She tried to provoke him into reckless actions, but Roland kept himself under control. Suddenly the girl remembered that because of this conversation, she completely forgot about the desire for revenge. The young man at first thought that it was about him, so he decided to ask again. But Bai Lin replied that she wished a painful death for the warden who shut her up and allowed himself to do this to her. So the girl wanted to tear him to pieces. It was terrifying, as Roland didn't quite understand how he should now stop this obsession and save Zhao's life. Suddenly, his expression made the demoness suspicious, which was a bad sign. But he tried to calm her down and said that for now the most important thing for them is to escape, and revenge can be taken at any time. Bai Lin thought about his words for a second and stopped. Then she realized that the boy was right, since she could no longer be under the lock and endless surveillance. So she got up and started pacing the room, thinking about the best way for them to leave this place. However, according to Roland's plan, they would have to use the warden for their own release. The girl did not understand how they should use their enemy, so she asked the young man to explain everything to her. He pointed his finger at the wall and asked Bai Ling to look there. The girl came closer and could not understand what the ordinary pipes were for and what they had to do with their plan. Then Roland said that there are pipes in the prison that lead outside. His plan is to use the pipeline to escape. However, they were too subtle, so the demoness still didn't understand anything. But the boy reassured her and said that there are also thick pipes in the building that will help them. After that, he said that when he was taken to this place, he saw pipes, the diameter of which is so large that dozens of monsters can be passed through them. So if they manage to follow the pipeline scheme, they will be able to get out. And such an important thing as a scheme should be in the chief supervisor's office. So they just need to get there and kidnap the warden himself. After that, find the schematic, and finally use the man as cover to head to the pipeline. And the jailers won't be able to catch them without a map. There was only one question, whether the monsters would be able to handle the warden, so Roland said that they would most likely need helpers. However, the demoness was confident in her own abilities and said that she would cope with the main thing on her own. After that, the young man added that there was only one problem left to solve. How exactly should they get to the chief's office without being caught by the guards? Roland said that they had to get Zhao to pay attention to them, but it was unclear how. But Bai Lin also decided to take this point on herself, saying that she has information that people will definitely not refuse. They did not think long about the escape plan, since Roland had planned everything long ago. However, now he had to do what Bai Lin didn't want to do, which was to put the shackles on her. But there was no choice, as they needed to lure the guards to their cell. So you will have to pretend for a while that they are chained up. The demoness didn't want their plan to fail, so she dutifully held out her hands. After that, Roland put iron handcuffs on her, and at least for a while she could feel that everything was under control. And when he tied himself up, he was ready to start their plan. Then he turned his back to Bai Ling and could enjoy the peace for at least a few seconds. Everything went according to his plan, so all that remained was to work well. After finishing the preparation, Roland began to scream as if he was being cut and begged for help. He rushed to the bars and addressed the guards, saying that he needed to announce something important. But despite the loud screams, there was no one in the corridor, so no one came to the cell for a long time. Rather than the guards, the screams were heard by other prisoners, so soon the sound reached the guards as well. As soon as Roland saw the man in uniform, he was immediately glad that his plan was still working, so he kept saying that he had something important to tell. However, despite the importance of the news, the guard was terribly angry that someone had broken the general silence. So he went up to the young man and through the bars began to curse as hard as he could. After that, he opened the metal door and wanted to start beating the prisoner. The boy did not have time to open his mouth to tell everything when a man rushed at him with a bat. However, he was stopped by Bai Lin, who quietly said that she had arranged all this. Suddenly the guard stopped, and Roland was very lucky, because he would lie unconscious again and have terrible dreams. The man did not hear well what the demoness said, so he turned his attention to her and asked her again. The girl repeated that Roland fulfilled her request. Then she asked the guard to convey to the head of the concentration camp that she could no longer stay in this terrible place and wanted to report some information, namely the location of her clan's intelligence headquarters. So she ordered them to be taken to the warden immediately until she changed her mind. The man did not fully understand what he was supposed to convey and wondered about the intelligence headquarters. But without thinking long, he complied with the request, hoping that he would be able to do a good deed for Chief Zhao Xing. As soon as the demoness and Roland arrived at the chief's office, he immediately said that considering how high-ranking figure Bai Ling was in the kingdom, there must be a lot of information. So he ordered the girl to tell everything, and he would judge how valuable what he heard was. And although it was a collaboration, if the man really managed to get valuable information, then it would be a great achievement. Bai Lin and Roland stood in silence for a while and were about to proceed with the further actions of the plan. The boy carefully observed how exactly the demoness would manage to approach the boss and what information she would provide him. But there should not have been any problems, because Zhao was ready to cooperate, as a matter of course. However, the girl was sure that first she would deceive the head supervisor. Then she and Roland would find the pipeline diagram and escape together. So the boy eagerly waited for Bai Lin's story to begin. Suddenly, the girl said that there were 4 people at 8, 7, 6, and 5 o'clock, and the one at 12 is the strongest. She spoke rather softly and slurred, so Zhao Xin couldn't hear what she was saying. Roland made a remark to her, and asked why Bai was mumbling something under her breath. Meanwhile, she was looking out the window, then at her fingers, carefully calculating something. And then she whispered to the young man that she had come up with a new plan and would act according to it. He was afraid that now he was not in control of the situation and could not predict the possible consequences. Bai Lin then suggested that she just jump out of the window and run away as fast as possible. However, this option was not suitable for Roland, so inside he screamed with all his might, but tried not to show his feelings. Then Roland wondered if Bai Ling really intended to throw herself out of the window. It was all strange, so the boy suspected that the girl had another plan from the beginning, and she just used it for her own purposes. The Secret Service has developed an evacuation route for them, and now the demoness is coming out and has put sticks in his wheels. But the only thing the young man was afraid of was that the same woman from the Secret Service might guess about his cooperation, which could end very badly for him. What's more, there were rocks down near the concentration camp, and most likely, during the jump, Roland and Bai would have spent on them, and not in the sea. At that moment, the young man realized that he had to start acting. Otherwise, the end would come for both of them. He quickly and quietly turned to the demoness and asked why she had suddenly decided to change their plan. Because at first they agreed to take the prison warden hostage, get the scheme, and escape through the pipeline. That girl saw one goal, to leave the prison, and she decided that it would be much easier and faster to jump to the window. The guy agreed with this, but the girl did not take into account some nuances of such a plan, especially how high off the ground they are, and the bottom of the rock. So if they can't fly, they'll just die right away. Despite Roland's nervousness, Bai Lin asked her to trust him and then everything would be fine. But the boy could not trust his life to the person he met less than a day ago. She was tired of listening to this whining, and offered the young man to stay alone in the prison. And given that he knows how to pick locks, he will be able to escape on his own. However, Roland knew that an attempt to escape would be immediately followed by the death penalty. So according to the demoness, he had no choice but to run away with her. But suddenly their argument was interrupted by the main boss, who was still waiting for some important information. Besides, now he was curious about what the prisoners in his office were whispering about. After such a sharp sound, the boy and the girl turned their attention to the man and were now thinking about how to proceed. They stood in silence, but the head of the concentration camp was serious about talking. But he immediately warned that if the prisoners came up with something, the consequences for them would be severe. After that, he reminded them about their families, saying that for their sake, they should try to return alive from prison. Roland thought about these words because he had heard them before, but he was a different person. It seemed that the Secret Service lady had asked Zhao to remind the young man of his duty to complete the mission. Aggression ran through his brain. Now he stood with his hands clenched into fists. His behavior was immediately noticed by Bai Lin, so she began to worry a little about her partner. Zhao Xin then insisted again that the prisoners should tell him all the information, and if it was valuable, they would be freed. They were still silent, and there were a large number of armed guards behind them, and Bai Lin took this into account. The demoness observed the behavior of one of the guards, and wanted to check how he would react to her certain movements. The girl cautiously stepped towards the window and waited for what would happen next. At that moment, Roland realized that he always had to be ready, as the next step would be improvisation. Bai Ling turned to Zhao and said that the information she wanted to give was very secret, so she could only tell him. The man became curious, so he decided to stand up at the table himself and approach the demoness so that she would whisper in his ear. This added even more value to the information he was about to hear, so it was a good psychological move on Bai Lin's part. However, in reality, Zhao knew about the cunning plan, so he understood that there would be a fight with him first, after which he would be taken hostage, and then they will find the scheme and the prisoners will escape through the pipeline. And just after that, the mission will be successfully completed, so there is very little of this game left. Suddenly, the chief's steps stopped and he understood some nuance. Everything was not so simple because he didn't know what to do next. He understood that the demoness would definitely kill him, and since he was an ordinary supervisor, the management would immediately find a replacement for him. So this plan threatened not only Agent Roland, but also Zhao himself. The man looked at Bai Lin, whose face already showed that she was determined to tear the boss to pieces. Then Zhao decided that he needed to talk to Roland somehow so as not to get himself into trouble. As soon as he looked at the young man, he continuously, as if mad, tried to wink at him. The boy also knew that he had to somehow warn the man that the demoness was going to jump out of the window, so that he would at least do something. After which the girl will abandon this idea and they will return to his plan. The man understood the agent's hints, so he was aware that the boy was warning him of danger. But suddenly he noticed how actively Roland was trying to open the window behind him. Zhao Xin looked. There was lightning outside the window, and it was still raining heavily, so at first he had no idea what was going on. And after thinking for a while, the chief came to the wrong conclusion. He thought that the boy was trying to tell him to let them jump out of the window, and then they wouldn't have to take him hostage. The man again took it as a noble gesture, saying that the young man was trying to save his life. Roland looked at the head chief with frightened eyes, because he was worried that the man would take the information correctly. Zhao Xin's gait was uncertain, so he stopped at his desk for a while to make sure his deductions were correct. This seemed strange to Bai Ling, so she began to worry that their plan would not be foiled. Therefore, she decided to provoke the boss, and, calling him highly respected, asked why he was afraid to come closer. Like in the camera, he looked much grander. The man squirmed with a loud laugh, but did not go any further. Demonessa didn't like it very much. She felt strong aggression and asked the supervisor why he was laughing after her words. He soon replied that he found Bai Ling's clumsy way of tricking her husband funny. She was imprisoned for so long, and during this time she never even opened her mouth, but now she decided to speak. After which Zhao called the demoness a fool if she decided to come to him, because he could see right through her. The girl was scared, because she did not expect that the supervisor would bite her plan. But Roland was worried about why Zhao had deviated from their plan, because he was supposed to approach Baioin and pretend to be defeated, and then be taken hostage. So his plan was much safer than jumping out the window. Meanwhile, the overseer was proud of how well he managed to shock the demoness and outwit her. Then he specifically voiced his guess about the fact that he should have come closer to the girl, and she would have pounced on him. After that, he provocatively asked why she didn't come up with another way. He even indicated that the pipeline diagram is in his safe. However, he figured out the plan of the prisoners, thereby preventing them from following him. Bai Ling laughed at this act and called Zhao an arrogant fool who made 2 fatal mistakes. The man did not understand what exactly he did wrong, so he asked the girl. But without waiting a long time for an answer, he said himself that the demon still did not understand what a disadvantageous position she was in if she allowed herself to talk to him like that. However, Bai answered with a smile, saying that the supervisor did not understand anything about the whole situation. She said that she came for a reason. Then she added that she really needed that scheme, but the question was how to get it out of the safe. Then the man also inquired about this, because the girl is in handcuffs and cannot do anything on her own. But suddenly, he saw that the shackles on the hands of the demoness were not in their usual position. They say they were not completely locked. And he turned out to be right, because Bai Lin immediately removed the iron handcuffs and released her inner demon to freedom. Zhao Xin did not expect this turn of events because he did not know that the girl would manage to free herself. After that, she immediately rushed at the overseer to take revenge for all the suffering he had caused her. But the man managed to fend off the unexpected attack and survive. However, he was worried about the question of how the demoness managed to break the secret lock. She didn't give a clear answer, but said that shackling her was a bad idea for everyone. Roland stood to the side and tried to maintain eye contact with Chief Zhao in order to point out his next course of action in case anything happened. Then the man realized that it was the handiwork of the young man. He said that thanks to this he managed to leave the Green Island. Zhao tried to control the situation and play along with the agent. After that, the head of the concentration camp said that although the prisoners were freed from the handcuffs, it did not make sense. Then he turned quickly and reached into his pocket to find the walkie-talkie. He immediately contacted security, which was on other floors, and was also waiting for a signal. The man ordered all the guards to go up to his office immediately because the prisoner was trying to escape, so Class A martial law was declared. Zhao Xin was still convinced that Roland and the demoness should jump out the window, so he tried to limit all other ways out. So now that there was no option to escape through the main passage or the pipe, he simply watched Bai's next actions. Zhao decided to add fuel to the fire and ordered the guards present to start shooting at the prisoners. They immediately took up weapons and aimed at the demoness and the boy. But they were waiting for the final decision of the chief overseer. Then the girl got scared and turned to Roland to make sure that he would go with her. However, the young man stood idly by and could not dare to make the right decision, so that in the end he would not be left behind by his family. Soon the guards opened fire and could easily kill the prisoners on the command of the commander. The demoness began to dodge the bullets and tried to save Roland, who seemed to freeze in fear. After that, Bai Lin unfurled her demonic foxtail, which served as a shield for her. She wrapped herself and the boy in it, protecting them from machine gun fire. Soon she took Roland's hand and told him to get ready to act. However, the boy did not believe that the girl was really determined to jump. But she didn't have any other ideas, so for a start she still consulted her partner. However, he did not know what to do, since the supervisor wanted to kill them, and there was no exact probability that they would survive jumping from such a height. But what Roland didn't know was that the chief warden actually didn't pursue the goal of actually killing them, but simply misunderstood the information given. He continued to try to block other passages for prisoners, and now decided to start shooting himself. The man possessed incredible energy, and having accumulated it in his hand, he could easily use it as a weapon. Suddenly, a sharp blade appeared through his hand, burning like a ball of fire. Soon, Chief Zhao also stood armed with a sharp spear that emitted fire. Bai Lin stood up for Roland, because he was in a state of affect and could not defend himself. Meanwhile, the demoness made sure that Zhao had indeed reached the realm of the masses, and accordingly, by the standards of the human race, it was already the threshold of third-level materialization. And the chief confirmed that there are 720 acupuncture points in the human body, and if you open 206, you can collect energy and transform it. Roland then turned to the demoness and asked if they could defeat him on their own. That girl replied that a fight would only delay their escape, so she insisted on just jumping out of the window. She looked at the glass to calculate the approximate force with which she would need to jump. After that, she took the boy's hand and told him to repeat everything after her. Then the girl began to pick up speed and ran straight into the glass window to break it with the strength of her body. Zhao thought everything was going according to plan, but there was one last touch left. The man started running with a gun at Agent Roland and tried to inform him of his intentions. The sharp end of his spear resembled fiery lightning that came from the sun. Suddenly, Roland saw the head of the concentration camp approaching him with a weapon in his hands. The metal spear almost hit the boy, but he barely managed to dodge the possible blow. Zhao Xin did not understand what the matter was, because he thought that this was exactly what the young agent had ordered him to do. So the man continued to brandish the weapon in an attempt to injure the prisoners. But Roland fell to the floor to stay alive and not get hit by a spear. And the demoness continued to run out the window in an attempt to leave the prisons and get free. Roland started yelling at his partner to help him and not just give up. The girl didn't seem to want to think about anyone but herself, so she pretended not to start the request. The young man was afraid that he would be abandoned in such a difficult situation. However, Bai Lin suddenly stretched out her demonic hand towards the window. She managed to break it into small pieces with one touch of the glass, and there was only a little left to get free. Chief Zhao looked at this and said that the bond between the two prisoners was not as strong as it seemed at first. Then the man decided that he would first deal with Roland. He aimed a sharp spear directly at the young man's head, and it was all that was left for him to die. However, unexpectedly, Bai Lin used her protective tail and extended it to Roland. She managed to knock back the overseer's weapon and grabbed the young man's leg. The boy did not understand what was happening, but he was glad that he had survived. But suddenly the girl pulled his tail towards her and dragged the young man along the floor. Next, the demoness lifted the boy up to swing even more and break the nearby window a second time. Bai Lin looked down and saw a large number of stone rocks under the prison building. She was aware that now the life of two monsters depended on the power of her jump. Roland tried to stop the girl and tentatively offered to think again about their plan. However, it was too late because Bai sped off to jump, holding the boy by her tail. She jumped with all her might through the broken window, holding her feet tight to land successfully. Chief Zhao moved closer to the window and just silently looked down. The man whispered that Agent Roland should not blame him, that he was only following orders. He recalled the same phone conversation where he had received instructions regarding this mission. The warden was ordered to ensure that Roland was seriously injured during the escape, to eliminate any suspicion as much as possible. It was an order that the man was obliged to carry out. There were no contractual instructions for performance, but he had to live up to expectations. So to be sure of his own actions, Zhao Xin decided to throw a sharp spear down after the fugitives. The prisoners fell for quite a long time, as they flew from the highest floor of the building. Suddenly, the young man heard something flying behind him and making a strange sound, but he did not pay attention at once. But he felt how this thing was getting closer and closer to him, and when he turned around, it was already too late. The sharp spear hit him directly in the back and pierced through, catching his internal organs. The boy began to cough up blood directly at Bai Lin, who was below him. The girl turned around and saw her partner, whom she was holding by the tail, badly wounded. The demoness had to let go of her tail, as under the influence of her emotions, she could no longer control it. Despite the excruciating pain, Roland clung to the sharp spear, trying to pull it out of his body by himself. But as soon as he began to move the iron, it seemed to dissolve in the air and left behind a golden trail. Meanwhile, Overseer Zhao was standing on top and was tormented by the thought of what he had done. However, he was also just following orders. The young agent fell for Bai Lin, but tried to somehow touch her. With tears in his eyes, he shouted how much he did not want to die. That girl promised him that the young man would stay alive. As it turned out, the girl correctly calculated the force of the jump and fell directly into the water. She used her tail as a protective ball that cushioned their fall and allowed them to breathe underwater. Chief Zhao then ordered his subordinate to hand over to the Marine Patrol to track down the fugitives as soon as possible. After that, the ship was launched into the sea, where the military searched for Roland and Bai Lin. The search continued for quite a long time, but no fugitives were found in the third zone. After some time, the men discussed among themselves that most likely they would not be able to carry out the order, because the third sea zone is quite large, and they were the only ones who had a ship. so as a result they came to the conclusion that most likely the prisoners drowned. The soldiers looked at the water for a long time, and suddenly something caught their attention. Then one of the men decided that he needed to get closer to the place where he dreamed of something. But as it turned out, the unknown object itself rapidly began to approach the ship. After that, one of the sailors ordered to turn on the searchlights, because there was an enemy attack on the starboard side. Suddenly, a huge green ball jumped out of the water and headed straight for the ship. This was Bai Lin, who was inside the orb that was made from her tail. The Sea Patrol did not understand who was flying directly at them, so it was decided to open fire. Inside the ball, the demoness kept Roland all the time, trying to keep him alive. The girl was aggressive, because the thirst for revenge had not left her since her imprisonment. She landed on the ship and opened her tail, which served as a good defense. But the sailors continued to shoot at her, in an attempt to kill the unknown person who seized their ship. However, the demoness managed to use her tail here too, with which she deftly deflected each bullet. At that moment, her eyes filled with black color, which indicated the maximum release of the demon. So she then used her tail as a weapon to launch a corresponding attack at the enemy. She managed to cut the sailors in one fell swoop, saving herself unnecessary problems. But one guy managed to survive, but not for long because the smart Bai Lin wanted to get to everyone. After which she jumped off to go to the cabins to give Roland some peace. So she heroically carried him in her arms to further give him first aid. The demoness continued on the ship, and the cries of the sailors only grew louder due to her presence. But there was also a lot of blood. The girl did not spare anyone who met her. Soon she attacked the captain of the boat, who begged the demoness not to kill him. She needed to get some benefit, so she asked the man if he was good at steering the ship. He replied that he could and was ready to do anything just to stay alive. Therefore, Bai ordered him to set sails to the sea, keeping the signal on board and continuing contact with the main station, to tell them that the ship decided to look closer to the sea for the unclean. Intimidated, the captain repeated that he would do whatever the demoness told him. Meanwhile, the girl decided to take care of Roland's condition and put him on the floor. The boy was still alive, but he felt terrible pain that went through his whole body and caused unbearable torment. Bai Lin tried to reassure him by saying that they were safe now. Soon she returned to the captain and asked to bring her a first aid kit. The man immediately ran for all the medicines that were on the ship. There was terrible weather at sea, but the captain held fast and did not interfere in his affairs without asking unnecessary questions. Soon the entire cabin was filled with bloody bandages and various medical preparations. The girl managed to treat the wound and bandage it to stop the bleeding. However, soon the bandage on the young man's body turned red again, which indicated a deep wound. Bai didn't know what to do anymore. She also spent a lot of her own strength during the fight in trying to save Roland. The boy was lying all wet because of a strong fever that had accompanied him for a long time. Soon he began to have various delusions, due to which he began to moan in his sleep. He saw himself from the outside, as if he were on a playground with a bunch of kids. Suddenly, his attention focused on a familiar children's toy. It was his younger sister's toy, which was seen on the playground with other children. The boy asked the girl to be careful and not to run too fast, because then the director would reprimand him. Suddenly, another sister, Xiaomen, came to him with an angry expression on her face. The girl was angry with her brother and considered him bad because he bought a toy just for Amu and forgot about her. But the boy reminded his sister about her birthday, which was supposed to be the next day, and said that he would buy her the most delicious cake. The little girl was happy with such news and immediately changed her mood. After that, she decided to spend more time with her brother and came closer to him. She emphasized that she wanted a chocolate cake, where there would be a lot of filling and chocolate itself. Roland accepted the order with a smile and said that they had agreed. The sister asked how they could agree if the boy had an assignment and was busy. Roland was surprised at what he heard and decided to ask his sister what exactly she had just told him. The girl sadly looked at her feet and repeated to her brother that he still had not completed the task. After that, she raised her head, which was bloody from the bullet, and said that they could all die because of him. The boy was terrified because a terrible picture appeared before him. All the children from the playground began to go to him, but each of them had a shot in the head. In front of everyone was his sister Amu, who outwardly resembled a recruited robot. Suddenly, he heard someone from behind asking him if it was pleasant to watch how all the people close to him were dying right in front of his eyes. Roland turned back in fear and saw the same woman who was pointing out the task to him. It was Lan Muyan. However, she did not like this disrespect towards herself and emphasized that she was Mrs. Lan Muyan to Roland. After that, Roland turned to the woman, saying that she promised that as long as he worked for the Secret Service, his family would be safe. Miss Lan doesn't like this tone in her direction, so she decided to remind the young agent of something. He said he has no right to impose his conditions on her because the life of his family depends only on what she wants. And the boy was lucky that the Secret Service liked him. But Lan asked Roland not to expose himself because he was not alone. And in the case of a well-executed task, he will receive a good attitude towards himself. But the young man did not need it, The main goal was to keep his family safe. Suddenly, the woman decided to finish off the boy, but he managed to dodge the unexpected blow in time. She only touched his face a little, but it was only a slight scratch. However, the woman decided not to stop there and hit Roland in the stomach a second time. The boy was thrown with great force to another corner of the playground, but there was no one around. Roland again lay beaten and bleeding, trying to regain his breath. That woman from the Secret Service did not want to stop, because the truth was to show everyone how much she should be respected. She came closer to the boy and stepped on his chest, stopping his breathing. After that, she repeated that she should only be addressed in a respectful manner, Miss Lan Muyan. And as long as Roland is in her Secret Service, he can only be her faithful dog, who has no right to his opinion. And if he once again decides not to obey her, he will be left without a head. Suddenly, the boy felt a great pain, so much so that he could not hold back a scream. Soon, he came to his senses and began to carefully move his eyes, trying to see everything around. He saw an unknown man driving the ship, and the boy himself, inexplicably for him, for some reason was lying on the floor. Roland understood that the last delirium was only a dream, but even in it, he could not find the strength to fight back against the lady. He could not get the phrase out of his head about the fact that he is just a faithful dog. So then he confidently decided to show Lan Muyan that the defeated dog also had sharp claws. Bai Lin saw that her partner had regained consciousness and started to move, so she realized that he had been having a terrible dream again. Roland carefully looked at the demoness, but still did not quite understand what had happened to him. Suddenly he felt a pain in his stomach and decided to look at his body, seeing the bloody bandage, and immediately thanked the girl. But she called it repayment for the fact that the boy freed them from handcuffs, thanks to which she managed to escape. Fortunately for him, such an injury does not go away after a while, because the Kanglin clan has an innate strong ability to regenerate. However, the young man was more interested in the question of how they ended up on the ship. The girl explained that when Roland lost consciousness, she captured the patrol ship that was looking for them. The boy was afraid that it was a human ship and they would still be found. However, the demoness said that everyone present on the ship was killed, and only the one who steered it remained, so counts it as wasted time in prison. The man at the helm behaved quietly, and was afraid to turn around one more time, lest he lose his life. Roland began to examine the entire room, in which the bloody corpses of sailors were scattered everywhere. One of them even had a giant hole in his chest. After assessing the situation, the young agent asked the demoness where they were going now.
Suddenly, the man at the wheel shouted and ordered everyone to be careful.
Bai Lin and Roland turned around at such a loud cry, not understanding what he saw. Suddenly, the ship began to shake violently from side to side, and those present on it could not keep their balance. There was a strong storm at sea, and the ship was almost put on its side, almost sinking it. Roland rolled against the wall, holding tightly to his wound so that the bandage would not unroll. Then he immediately asked the captain if someone from outside had attacked them. But Bai Lin was pleased and told everyone to calm down as they had already arrived at the place. The boy did not know where they were going, so he was surprised at the last phrase of the demoness. Then the girl explained that it was the shortest way from the third sea zone of the Xuanyu Kingdom, which led to the Sea of the Unclean. Everything around looked scary. Strong fog, dark sky, and strange smell. In the Sea of Darkness, there were many huge, sharp, rocky rocks that prevented the ship from sailing normally. Roland, together with Bai Lin, went to the outer part of the king, and this sea seemed quite dangerous to the boy. The water in it was very cloudy, and all the time funnels formed in it, which at any moment could sink into itself. Then the boy said that even though he himself was from the demon clan, he had never seen this sea. The storm and turbulence in it were the main reasons. So it is not surprising that the naval attacks of the Xuanyu Kingdom are ineffective. The girl agreed that the kingdom had now become quite powerful, and she was afraid that if it weren't for this sea, they would have lost the southern part long ago. The ship continued to sway, and the young man could not stand on it, so he kept falling. He worried that the waters there were merciless, who didn't care if there were monsters on the ship or not. So if they continue to sail, the ship may capsize. After that, Bai Lin smiled and said that she would not let the boy die in the belly of the fish. Suddenly, she began to make strange sounds, as if calling someone to her. Due to the increased humidity, her screams quickly spread through the space. Suddenly, an incomprehensible sea creature appeared through the water, holding a sharp trident in its hands. The monster resembled a giant fish with glowing eyes and rough scales instead of skin. In addition to this creature, seals began to gather near him. They all swam together to help Bai Lin on the ship. Roland was frightened by such monsters, so he asked the demonesses who they were. But one of the creatures began to crawl inside the ship, getting closer and closer to Bai Lin. There were many monsters. All of them looked ugly and unusual to Roland, but he tried not to show them. The man at the helm almost died of fear, realizing that now his end would surely come. One of the creatures came to his cabin and ordered him to leave the room immediately. Then Roland asked the demoness once more whether it was by howling that she succeeded in summoning these creatures. The girl replied that it was the guards. One of their representatives asked why Bai had captured the vessel of the Xuanyu state and stormed into the impure waters without sending him a message. The demoness introduced herself as a Kazan from the Tsintu clan, who was captured and imprisoned 3 months ago, but managed to escape. She asked the creatures to take her back, for which she would be grateful. Then the sea monster asked if the girl was really from the Qingchu clan, but for more confidence, she decided to demonstrate her strength and turn into a real demon. So now in this form, she asked if the guard still did not believe her. He opened his jaw and did not know what to answer, because it was the first time he had seen such a thing. Therefore, after that, he immediately bowed low and congratulated the lady on her successful escape. However, she did not need this courtesy, because she wanted to get to Hancheng as quickly as possible. And besides, she ordered that no one should know about her return. Therefore, now these guys had no right to move away from the demoness even an inch. Roland did not expect his partner to turn out to be such an influential person. However, the sea creatures did bow once more and promised to carry out the order. Meanwhile, in Hancheng, there was a terrible lightning, and everything resembled a real, gloomy hell. And in the city where everyone respected the king, everyone already knew the new news. Milord was immediately informed that the third lady had re-entered the city. He really did not expect that the girl would be able to escape from human captivity. Moreover, there was no news from her, so he did not have time to do anything. Although he had a lot of experience, he felt that the demoness could bring a lot of trouble in the future. Therefore, his servant immediately offered to get rid of her himself. But the king replied that Bai had just returned, and their every sharp step would be noticed. However, sooner or later he will still get everything he wants. And a mysterious ship arrived at the port facility of Hanshin. Bai Lin and Roland came out first, followed by all the guards. Then one of them apologized and said that their purpose was to accompany the demoness to the city. But now they must go. After that, Bai thanked her and turned to Ao Jiang, saying that she would ask Admiral of the Coastal Defense Ao Sha to appoint him as Commander-in-Chief. It was the best thank you could give a creature, so he bowed and left. It was the first time Roland had seen such a large city, so he looked carefully at all the buildings. In his opinion, Hanshin had a bad reputation and future, but the city turned out to be quite prosperous. To Bai Ling, his surprise was quite understandable, even though the Xuanyu state was far superior to the impure realm. Hanshin is adjacent to the sea, and thanks to the waterways has good trade. Besides, it is guarded by heavy troops. It is one of the 3 main cities of the kingdom, so it was not surprising. Then the boy asked his partner where they should go next, and she answered that they were now heading home. Suddenly, a large convoy of black cars with tinted windows drove by them. Roland was surprised, and even a little scared by such a large number of official cars, but the convoy stopped right in front of them, so the young man immediately asked Bai Ling if they had come for her. Demonessa herself was surprised by such a bright meeting in her hometown. Soon the door of one of the cars quickly opened and a beautiful girl stepped out. She confidently walked towards Bai Lin to meet her to talk to her as soon as possible. Roland looked at the unknown lady and thought to himself how beautiful she looked. But he did not expect that this lady would start bowing before his familiar demoness. The girl called Bai Lin her mistress and said how glad she was that the demoness managed to escape from prison. Bai Lin was not very happy that the information about her dismissal was available to everyone, so she immediately asked the girl if she was okay, and instead of answering, she immediately began to cry and speak unintelligibly. But those were tears of happiness. After all, from the day Bai was arrested, the girl missed her day and night. For the first time, something was able to move the fierce demoness, so tears appeared in her eyes as well. The girl was so happy to meet that she did not pay attention to Roland, who was standing next to her lady. So when she calmed down, she decided to ask Bai Lin who this guy was. Roland looked scared and couldn't even introduce himself because of the surprise. So Bai Lin did it for him and told the girl that he was the guy who helped her escape from prison. After that, the young lady began to show her gratitude to Roland for saving her landlady, and promised to be sure to thank her. Roland felt embarrassed and uncomfortable that she saw Bai right away, so she offered to discuss all the details at home. Her subordinate agreed with this and immediately ran to the car to open the door for her mistress. Everywhere the demoness heard congratulations on her return, and she told Roland to ride with her. The city is unclean and has really developed well recently, because there were many new bridges that crossed the river. A convoy of cars, one of which was driven by Bai Lin and Roland, drove right across the bridge. The boy was looking out the window, trying to see the new city for himself, while the demoness was lost in her thoughts. Roland paid attention to the girl and decided that it was necessary to somehow distract her. However, he did not know where to start, so he hesitated over which question to ask first. The demoness felt the unpleasant situation, so she immediately told the young man not to be ashamed because he saved her life. But the only thing he asked for was for the driver to drop him somewhere on the road, as he did not want to get in touch with influential people. The girl did not understand this request, since from the very beginning she said that Roland would go home with her. Moreover, he helped her get out, and thanks to him, she was alive. so the demoness wanted to repay him with the possibilities of her family. And she also added that this kind of payment can change the fate of a young man. But the boy didn't know anything about her family and asked the girl who she was. Then she began the story with the fact that this city was not originally called Hanshin, but Chinchu. It was the sacred city of the Demon Fox clan, and the ancestor of Bai Lin was the head of the city, the nine-tailed Qingchu Chi. After the Holy War, he was defeated and surrendered to the Demon King, and the city of Xingyu was renamed Harchin. After that, the Demon King, in order to control the power of their clan, relocated 3 large clans and 24 small clans there to hold the island together. However, there were now 4 main clans living on the island: the Qingchu, Ao, Shan, and Yu. The first of them is the largest in Maine. Roland then expressed his displeasure at not knowing everything, saying that he himself belonged to the Demon Clan, but knew nothing of it. Bai Ling then asked him if the young man still wanted to give up her reward, but he still stuck to his thoughts, because he had previously known that the girl was quite popular among the locals. But now knowing the details, he definitely did not want handouts. The demoness took this to mean that Roland wanted nothing to do with her. However, he began to shake his head and said that she understood everything correctly. And although it was unpleasant, that girl was surprised, because no one had ever dared to refuse her like that. But she repeated that if the boy returned with her, he would be richly rewarded. And if she doesn't want anything big, she offered at least money. Roland would have agreed to such conditions, but there was still a nuance. But Bai Lin didn't want to listen to his excuses anymore and ordered him to shut up. After the awkward conversation, Roland and Bai Lin drove in silence, pondering each other's last words. Soon they arrived at a huge building, which in terms of area resembled a real palace. The boy and the demoness got out of the car, and the latter came closer to the house and read the inscription, which indicated the residence of Xingzi. After that, the girl breathed a sigh of relief, because she finally got home. The guys at the entrance, who were real foxes, immediately greeted their lady with pleasure. One ordered the other to quickly tell the whole house that Bai Lin had returned. Then he joyfully ran to his ancestor, shouting to the whole room about the return of the lady. As soon as the demoness crossed the threshold of the house, the second fox servant bowed politely to her. Meanwhile, the second fox found Qingchu Lian, but shouted the news in order not to run close to him. But this angered the head of the residence, because shouting in his house was disrespectful and reckless. Then the young man explained to him that the girl had returned, and he was ordered to inform his ancestor about it. The old man didn't expect Bai Lin to be able to handle the human prison, so he was shocked. And the demoness herself was already walking through the house, together with her maid and Roland. Meanwhile, Qingchu Lian scolded the young fox and ordered him to slap himself on the lips 60 times as a punishment to serve as a warning to everyone else. The boy admitted his guilt and, standing on his knees, begged the manager to spare him. Suddenly, Bai Lin came up and decided to stand up for the young fox and asked Lian to be lenient and forgive the subordinate, because he was just happy to see her back. Xinxiu bowed low to her and offered the girl to start by visiting her ancestor, who missed her all the time. As for the stupid fox, he will solve this issue himself. Bai Lin did not like the way she had just been shooed away and gently asked to leave. At that moment, Roland realized that this man did not really respect the demoness, which indicated that there was someone higher in the house. That girl decided not to be silent, so she aggressively asked if she should ask Lian again to listen to her. However, the man replied that his duties included punishing the servants in the mansion, so he was doing his job, and only the mistress can order him. And if Bai sees injustice in the punishment, then she can report it to his owner, then he will listen to her. The old fox was satisfied that the girl would not succeed in leading him, so he emphasized that these were just the rules. Bai Ling was terribly angry, because she really couldn't break the established rules, but the resentment got the better of her. A cute girl, Bai's maid, entered the conversation, who began to threaten Lianya that she would tell everything to her ancestor and he would punish him. But the manager answered her that the girl was just a servant, and the landlady hates quarrels in the house more than anything. So it was better not to repeat such mistakes, because they say the young lady did not have the right to vote. She tried to hold back all the words and thoughts she so wanted to throw at the old man. Then the head of Qingchu again appealed to Bai Ling that he would handle his affairs on his own, but her ancestor had already waited. The demoness felt like a fool because of the behavior of the old fox and understood that if he was not taught, then these humiliations would never end. She could not bear it anymore and already clenched her fist tightly to finish off the leader. Nevertheless, she decided that unnecessary problems were unnecessary for her now, so she calmly went on. Qingchu Lian took a deep breath in relief because he could feel the mood of the demoness. However, Roland suddenly turned to the old man and asked him his name. And unexpectedly for everyone, the young man hit the head of the house with his leg. After that, the old man fell to the floor and quietly whimpered from the pain in his head, where he had been hit. The young fox, over whom the carnage continued, stood shocked.
Because I have never seen anyone in this mansion allow himself such a thing.
Bai Lin did not expect that her partner was capable of such a thing, because he always behaved quite quietly. However, Roland himself was satisfied with himself, since at least somewhere he did not have to follow instructions, but acted as he felt. In addition, the old fox behaved so terribly that even he was already out of his mind. The old man soon got up and immediately turned to Roland with a shout, asking who he was and how he dared to hit him. Then the boy asked him why he makes rules for others, but does not follow them himself. After all, he is the head of the residence and must always do what the owners tell him. However, for some reason, Mrs. Bai openly disobeys. At the end, the young man asked if suddenly Bai Lin was no longer his mistress, or if he now considered himself above her family. The manager agreed with his words and did not answer anything except words of agreement. But at that moment his teeth sharpened and he angrily asked Bai who this gentleman was next to her. And she replied that Mr. Roland was the one who helped her escape from the human prison. Qing Chu Lian called the young man the savior of the demoness, but he did not sincerely praise his good deed. However, he decided to follow the instructions and let the young fox go without punishment. He was on his knees and thanked the manager Lian profusely, although it was not his merit. Old Qing Chu wanted to be alone as soon as possible, so he reminded Mrs. Bai again about waiting for the ancestor. She understood that she had to go already, so she bowed her head and answered that she was already leaving. Roland left with the demoness, but decided to leave a disgruntled look at the old servant. Qing Chu Lian pretended not to notice this, but was actually holding back so as not to immediately retaliate for this attitude towards him. He watched a couple of fugitives for a long time and was clearly not happy about their presence. However, he sharpened his teeth on Roland and was sure that one day they would see each other again. But Bai Lin, going to the palace of the ancestor, was in her thoughts all the way, feeling depressed because of staying at home. But while the ancestor was waiting for the girl in her rooms for a long time, she was an elderly woman, but despite this, she still took good care of herself. Her name was Chinchu Dan, and she was the ancestor of the famous Chinchu clan. The woman kept asking her young servant if there was any news about Bai Lin's return, and the young girl reassured her by saying that the demoness would soon manage to get out of the concentration camp and she would definitely return. These news were not comforting because no one could guarantee that Bai would really stay alive and she would be able to return. But suddenly another maid ran into the ancestor's room, shouting to the whole room about the return of the lady. The elderly woman did not expect the girl to return, so this was great news. Ancestor carefully stood up from her throne to meet the indomitable Bai Lin with dignity. A maid immediately came to her aid, so that the woman would not fall, as age was showing itself. But soon the demoness really entered the room, followed by Roland and the young servant. As soon as the girl entered the room, tears appeared in her eyes. Tsintiu Dan was her grandmother, who always called the girl Linier. The woman did not have the strength to walk on her own, but she hurried to meet her granddaughter as best she could. The ancestor took the demoness by the hands and did not want to let her go anywhere. She could not stop admiring her granddaughter, by whose eyes the woman understood that the girl had overcome a difficult path in order to return alive. But Bai Ling held out her hands to her grandmother and apologized for having to worry about her absence. However, she tried to reassure Qindan that she had returned safe and sound. And for the loving grandmother, the health of her native girl was the most important thing. But soon the woman's attention shifted to what kind of young man was next to the girl. Bai Ding introduced Roland and said that he was the one who helped her break out of prison. If it weren't for him, the demoness would still be locked in that terrible place. The old lady was interested in the young man and asked him to tell her the details of their escape. The guy was a little embarrassed, so he didn't know where to start his story. Meanwhile, the cunning old fox could not calm down because of the humiliation he received from the unknown boy. So in order to get support, the head of the residence decided to turn to his master. He announced that the lady had returned and had brought with her a stranger named Roland. According to the girl, it was he who helped her escape from prison. The owner was busy with his affairs and did not want to be distracted by trifles, but this information interested him. So the elder of the Chinchu clan left his job and decided to learn more from his servant. The old man's name was Sinsa Aola, who was a terrible fox who had to go through a lot. His servant then asked if the master was going to meet Bai Ling in person, but he told the girl to go her own way. As for the benefactor, he ordered to reward him according to the rules of their clan. So having finished with the instructions, the elder returned to his business. Meanwhile, Bai Lin could not leave her old grandmother. She loved her so much. And the old woman listened to the details of the escape, but was surprised that the young men dared to jump out of the window directly onto the cliff. That girl said that people are losers or will never succeed in harming her, and the ancestor agreed with this. And as for Roland, the grandmother could not even think that he would turn out to be so talented. He was pleased to hear this, but the boy was not sure that he had done something supernatural. Then Chinchu Dan became interested in Roland's personal life and asked what clan he was from. The young man replied that he himself came from the Canlin clan in the north, but he considered himself rather a bastard of one of the branches. The grandmother asked why the boy was caught and what he had to go through. Roland thought to himself that the woman looked like a simple old woman, but in reality she was trying to probe him with every sentence. Therefore, he decided to remain silent about his imprisonment story, saying that it was too long to tell. But since the grandmother was inquisitive, he still agreed. Then he started from his childhood. When he was small, the northern city of Mochen and the nearby villages were affected by drought. Mochen was close to the border of the city of Xuanyu. So in order to survive, he followed his clan and made his way into the human world. Later, he learned to break charms and began to somehow earn a living by being a thief. However, he did not manage to go unpunished for a long time, so that's how he was caught. After that, he spent several years in the Green Island prison, but he managed to escape from there. And as soon as he got out, he was arrested again. Then the grandmother emphasized how difficult it was for the boy in the human world. And since he had saved Bai Lin, the old woman felt that she had to thank the young man, so she asked him what he wanted. He didn't know what to answer, since on the way to the residence he told the demoness that he didn't need anything. So the granddaughter decided to answer the grandmother herself that little brother Roland was absolutely not concerned about the reward. Because while they were driving, she herself offered to thank him, and he flatly refused and said that he did not want to have anything to do with their family. The grandmother took this phrase as if their clan were some kind of monster, so she asked Roland what was the reason for his refusal. But he replied that he considered his escape successful only thanks to Bai Lin. They helped each other, so he did not consider himself a hero. Bai Ling didn't want to hear praise in her direction now, so she started making faces like a child. However, the grandmother said that because of living with people, Roland became a real gentleman. But no matter what, the old woman was obliged to express her gratitude. Suddenly, a cunning fox entered the room of Tsintu Dan, who wanted to take revenge on an unknown young man. However, he told the ancestor that the elder had sent him to deliver, saying that he has important business, and that is why he will not come, so he hopes for understanding. Bai Ling looked at the subordinate and showed how displeased to see him with just one expression on her face. But Roland did not know who the elder was, and thought that he was Bai Lin's father, who had a bad relationship with each other. The ancestor replied to the fox that he could have simply informed Tsingtu Aiolu of his reluctance to come, rather than inventing excuses. But the fox insisted that the elder was really busy and apologized. Then the woman replied that she also had no desire to see such an egoist. However, in addition, she decided to present Roland as the savior of her granddaughter. Qing Chulian tried to hide his displeasure, so he said that they had already seen each other. The ancestor was more worried about how she would thank Roland, so she ordered the fox to ask the elder how he was going to pay for salvation. But as it turned out, the owner of Tsinyu Lianya had already given him an order in this regard. The patrol department in the north of the city, namely on Vulcan Street, lacks a commander. Although this is not a high position, it is not a low one either, suitable for young talents like Mr. Roland. Bai Lin asked about the street to which the boy would be sent. She knew that this place was a difficult area. The previous commander died due to an unknown cause. So the girl asked her grandmother if it was a good idea and suggested that the young man serve her in the army. The old woman thought about her granddaughter's words, because it was really dangerous to send Roland to that place. Then Lian intervened and said that the army is not the same as other branches of government. There you need to have a clear understanding of personnel. The demoness did not understand what the old fox was leading to, so she asked again. And he explained that Mr. Roland and Bai Lin have different statuses, and if they work hand in hand day and night, nothing good will come of it. Roland didn't have a chance to say his word at all, because he was being tossed around like a thing. However, he addressed everyone present and asked them not to quarrel over him. So his original intention was to escape from prison, not specifically to save Bai Lin. So he did not consider himself worthy of the award. The demoness spoke to him and asked if he really did not want to accept her kindness. The guy asked the girl not to be angry, because he didn't mean anything like that. Simple finds it a bit inappropriate. He didn't know anything about Henshin at all, and if he was appointed as the patrol commander, Roland knew that he would not be able to cope. However, Bai Lin perceived his every word as refusals and attempts to insult her. But it was not so, because Roland sincerely did not want to have anything in common. Then his grandmother stood up for him and said that the young man really did not know the area, because of which it would be very difficult for him. Only she stressed to Roland that Bai doesn't have many friends, and she thinks he does. The girl tried to hide her good attitude towards the young man, but it was still visible. And she was sincerely sad because she didn't understand why Roland was turning away from her so much. And the boy himself was surprised to hear that he was now a friend of the demoness. However, in order not to continue the unpleasant conversation, the ancestor said that, until they were in a hurry, the young man could stay in their house. Pretty soon night came and everyone went to their rooms to relax. Roland was also allocated a separate room and servants who were supposed to serve him. But the boy immediately let them go. The girls did not have the right to go, as the ancestor ordered them to be next to the master to help change clothes and wash. But the boy was not used to being served, so he wanted to be alone. and he told the servants to tell the ancestor that he had driven them out with his own hands. The maids humbly bowed to Roland and immediately left his chambers. The young man stood by the door for some time to make sure the girls had gone and left him alone. Therefore, as soon as he felt safe, he immediately started changing in the bathroom. He finally managed to get into the hot water, where all the muscles and bones will rest. He enjoyed a pleasant process after a difficult road and some time in prison. In addition, he finally managed to get into the kingdom of the unclean. But if he wasn't careful, he would have become a corpse long ago. Because all the residents would definitely want to know more about his life. But Roland was sure that they would not succeed. However, it is better to be alert all the time and not to trust anyone. Suddenly, someone began knocking persistently at his bathroom and asking if Mr. Roland was awake. The boy did not want to talk to anyone and did not understand who needed him at such a late hour. Suddenly, he realized that the voice was quite familiar. So emerging from under the water, he asked loudly who had come to him. It was the same girl, Bai Ling's maid, named Jie. From the very first meeting, the young man remembered the girl with her appearance, but he did not understand why she personally came to him. The servant immediately explained that she had come to Mr. Roland with a serious conversation. The guy was confused and asked the girl to wait outside the door so that he could at least get dressed. She wanted to get to the master as soon as possible, but obediently stood on the street. Soon the boy got dressed and, opening the door, immediately asked if something had happened. Jie did not say the reason, but immediately asked to enter the young man's quarters. He found this request a little strange, but decided to agree. Therefore, kindly opened the door for the maid, and she carefully entered the house. After that, Roland went to close the door and decided to carefully ask the girl why she came to him at such a time. He watched her reaction, and suddenly, something strange and unexpected happened. Ji bowed low to the boy and looked as if she felt very ashamed because her face was too red. The young agent got a little scared and leaned against the door, asking the maid what she wanted from him. However, the girl continued to stand motionless in front of him for some time and quietly spoke his name. Suddenly, out of the blue, Jie reached out her hands to the boy and tried to get physically closer to him every second. Soon she was barely leaning on Roland in her attempts to kiss him. The guy immediately asked the girl to move away and not be so close to him because it is unpleasant for him. However, the girl tried to explain to the boy that he charmed her at first sight, so she was ready to become his. All the while, she was whispering something in his ear, and because of this, Roland himself turned red and sweated profusely. Suddenly, Jie decided to be even more assertive and reached for her clothes. Roland stood there as if he was buried, because it was the first time something like this happened to him. But now he just wanted to rest. The maid carefully began to remove her dress to entice the young man. Afterwards, she took the boy's hand with her hand to increase the contact. But suddenly, Roland was able to control himself and not succumb to her charms, so he held out his hand. After that, he said that even if Jie didn't want to do it, she should restrain herself and not do it. The girl immediately took it as an insult, saying that the boy does not like her, although she herself volunteered for it. However, the young man replied that, not knowing the maid's intentions, he was still sure that Ji did not feel real attraction and sympathy for him. After looking into her eyes, he said that he saw nothing but tricks there. After that, he returned to the door again, and carefully looked to see if there was anyone near the house. And since the area was clear, Roland pointed to the exit and told Ji she could go. The girl was clearly angry that her plan had failed, but said nothing. And she just left the boy's room so that he would definitely notice her displeasure. The maid quickly ran away, disappearing into the darkness of the deep night. Roland was finally able to be alone and continue relaxing in the bathroom. However, he still found it strange that a girl would come to seduce him in the middle of the night, so he thought that it might be some kind of verification from Bai Ling or an ancestor, although the method of seduction was strange and unpleasant for the boy. Then he felt the true difference between humans and demons. Meanwhile, Jie hid near the house where Roland lived. She came to the conclusion that the young gentleman is not one of those superficial men who immediately fall for beautiful women. So he really wanted to help her mistress, and he can be trusted. The girl remembered the boy's look, which was so real and didn't even have a hint. True, she was saddened by the fact that Roland really did not like her. However, the maid tried not to draw attention to this and went on. In the meantime, Roland decided to calm down and do some meditation to regain his strength as soon as possible. He tried to feel the energy radiating from his body in blue flames. But suddenly his peace was disturbed again, but this time because of his own experiences. He felt the demonic origin begin to fuse in his body with the power of the acupuncture points. So that attack by the warden really helped to open some barrier for the boy. So he decided to test his own strength and transform into a demonic personality. The boy's body immediately changed and took on the shape of a wolf with giant paws and claws. He stood in the middle of the room and felt his body questioning with energy, because now he could use his full power and turn into a demon. The combination of the strong body of a monster and the strength of an immortal warrior is a blessing in disguise that allows him to defend himself much better. After finishing the experiments, Roland went to the window and opened it to calm down a bit. Suddenly he remembered the girls and boys from the charity house. and especially Xiao Men, who must have been sad without him. The boy looked at the full moon for a long time like a real wolf and missed the past and his family. But soon he managed to fall asleep and a new day began in a new city for him. The young man slept long and soundly, having not seen a single dream due to the reincarnation of the past few days. Suddenly, Bai Lin came to his house and kept knocking on his door so that he would wake up sooner. The boy opened his eyes and, being sleepy, did not understand who was rushing to him again. That girl continued to call Roland because she had to go. The young man opened the door and said, yawning all the time, that he had not had time to recover from his injury and needed rest. However, the demoness told him not to make it up, because everything was fine with his wound and the girl wanted to conduct a tour as soon as possible. So without letting Roland even wash and eat, she pulled him by the hand, and he had no choice but to obediently go with Bai Lin. After a short walk around the city, the girl nevertheless decided to invite her partner to visit one of her favorite establishments. There they took a lot of delicious and appetizing food, which Roland had not tried before. However, he was surprised that Bai Lin decided to order rather fatty dishes for breakfast. And the girl said that this was the first breakfast in the boy's new life, so she offered to drink for it. Roland was not very fond of alcohol, but for such a toast he decided to drink to the bottom. After the first glass, they talked for a long time and recalled some minor details of their escape. However, soon the girl decided to sincerely thank the boy for his help. But he didn't feel like the one who really deserved these words, since he didn't even plan to save the demoness in the first place. But her thanks were about the incident with the residence manager that Roland had taught a lesson, thereby saving Bai Lin. For a long time she admired the blow that the boy inflicted on the old fox. But the young agent replied that he simply could not stand and look at how he seemed to be mocking the girl. And then he decided to ask a question about why the subordinate Lian allows himself to treat Bai so rudely, and she does not dare to contradict him. At the end, Roland added that he was just curious, and if Bai did not want to answer, he could keep silent. And he turned out to be right, because after this question, Bai Lin's eyes immediately dropped and she offered to just eat in silence. So they didn't talk for the rest of the meal, but enjoyed the food. Soon the waiter came and presented another dish. It was matsutake scallop soup. For the first time, Roland was so surprised by the food because the soup had an incredible smell for him. However, as soon as he opened the container, his expression changed significantly. At the bottom of the plate, he saw a black eye emitting a red light. Out of fear and surprise, the boy overturned his plate and spilled some soup on the table. Bai Lin also became worried when she saw her friend's behavior, so she asked what happened. The boy decided not to tell the truth and said that his hand was shaking from exhaustion. After that, he immediately turned to the waiter and asked where the restroom was, and the man offered to show him. They left together, but Roland's opinion of the waiter had changed a lot. He realized that members of the Secret Service were following him everywhere. As soon as they reached the toilet, the man kindly opened the door for the boy. The young man went inside and examined everything around, because even the toilet in such an institution looked beautiful. The waiter even indicated which booth Roland should go to. And then he bowed and suddenly said that he was pleased to meet the secret agent. Roland looked at the man but did not answer, because he already suspected that he was already known here. So he went about his business, leaving the waiter at the entrance. In the meantime, the man closed the door behind him and his face continued to have a smile on his face. After that, he reached for the sign that indicated the repair work and placed it near the entrance to the toilet. Roland suspected that everything could be a reason, so he tried to be as careful as possible. He inspected the restroom in more detail and did not yet notice any other people or hidden cameras. So he went on and decided to enter the second booth pointed to by the waiter. At first, the boy hesitated for a long time because anything could be waiting for him behind that door. For fear of ending up dead, the young man thought that instead of a cabin, there might be a secret room. However, in order not to wait long, he still reached out to the door handle. And after considering all the pros and cons a little more, Roland pulled the door on himself. At first glance, there was nothing unusual there, so I had to take a closer look. However, there was nothing extra in the cabin, so the young man calmed down for a while. So I decided to be alone for a while and calm down after the message in the soup. Suddenly, his attention was caught by an extraneous object that definitely should not have been in the dressing room. It was a bright phone that hung on the booth station, and suddenly the phone rang loudly, so Roland was right about some kind of message. His eyes immediately widened from the adrenaline that appeared in his blood due to the unexpected sound. However, he still picked up the phone and asked who was calling him. It turned out to be Mrs. Lan Muyan from the Secret Service. From the first words, the woman called Roland a wolf. The guy didn't want to say anything in response to such a greeting, so he just kept silent. Meanwhile, the lady congratulated the young man and said that she had chosen a worthy dog for the work of her team. However, the boy was surprised and did not understand why he was receiving such praise. So I asked if it was because he miraculously managed to survive during his escape from prison. That woman asked him not to be angry, saying that the injury was part of her plan. However, Roland did not understand why his murder became part of the plan, and he did not know about it. But Lan Muyan replied that in order to gain trust, one must take risks. And since the boy did a good job, the demoness was already confident in him. Roland listened to these unpleasant words for him, and asked what the instructions were regarding further actions. However, the woman said that he needed to be a real monster in Hanshin, staying alive and climbing up the ranks. Therefore, now his task was to make his way to the top of the leadership, and only then he would become useful for the Secret Service. At that moment, Roland could not contain his emotions, and asked with a shout how he needed to get there. But Mrs. Lan did not give any hint, only wished her luck and said that this was an order that was not discussed. So after that, Muyan immediately dropped the phone and the call ended. Roland was angry because he did not know what to do next in order to stay alive and return to his family. He never succeeded in seclusion, so he decided to return to food. A waiter was waiting for him outside the door of the dressing room, who emphasized that Miss Bai Lin had waited for him. Roland did not respond to such a display of politeness, but quietly went to the demoness. However, I decided to ask the man one question, because he was interested in how many people like him are in Hanshin. And he answered that they do not have a high position, so they are always under the leadership of Roland, and he can turn to them when necessary. The boy drew his conclusions and was reassured by the fact that he was at least not alone in this city. Therefore, after finishing the conversation, he immediately returned to Bai, who was confused by the long absence of the young man. However, he understood that he had done something wrong, so he immediately apologized to the girl. He tried to hide his true emotions after the phone call, so he pretended to be a real gentleman. It was unusual for Bai Lin to see his friend in such a role. But Roland understood that he had no other choice. If he needs to get to the top in a short time, then he will have to make sacrifices. So as soon as he sat down at the table, he immediately asked the demoness if she wanted to show him Hanshin. The girl gladly agreed, because she wanted to give her savior a short tour, so soon they went for a walk. Bai Ling felt a little embarrassed for a moment because of the silence that passed between her and Roland. Therefore, I decided to ask the guy if he wanted to go somewhere in particular, or if they could just go for a walk. The young man remembered that the elder wanted to appoint him as a supervisor on Vulcan Street, so he suggested that Bai go there. At first, she did not understand why Roland chose this particular place, so she asked the reason. Although not hearing the answer, she immediately remembered the same offer. However, the boy replied that he just wanted to see what kind of place it was, and not to go for the proposed position. The girl suspected something in this answer, so she asked if Roland was telling her the truth. And he, of course, confirmed his words and thereby calmed down the demoness. After that, she kindly agreed to take a walk in that part of their city. Soon, Roland and Bai Lin came to a strange place called Vulcan Street. Local residents were mostly in a difficult situation, not having money for a normal existence, because of which there were many homeless people. Suddenly, a boy appeared on the street who could barely move his legs and was holding his stomach all the time. His appearance was tired. The young man's eyes were barely open, and there were big bruises under them. He strode toward a pharmaceutical trading firm called the Nine-Headed Bird. It was recently opened, so there was a presenter nearby who encouraged people to go to their company, where they could find any medicine. The Nine-Headed Bird has become the largest pharmaceutical company in the Kingdom of Evil. Senior management sympathized with the difficulties faced by the residents of Vulcan Street, so a new firm was founded to help people with their illnesses. However, local residents were not happy with such a discovery. Their tired faces wished for a quiet life and food. Suddenly, a small boy walked through the large crowd holding a handful of money in his hands. He held up the money for the host to see and said he needed medicine. There was little strength in his body, but he tried to speak as loudly as possible about his need. The mercantile man in charge of this event was happy that he had the first buyer. After that, he sat down next to the young boy and asked what exactly he needed. And he explained that his mother has a severe form of malaria, so he needs strong antibiotics. The man thought about this request and said that he would give a suitable drug for 500, but the guy didn't have that much money, so he asked for a discount or the option to pay the balance later. The man looked at him sternly, which already indicated a negative mood. After that, he said that their company does not engage in charity, and their doors are always open, but only to those who have the opportunity to buy medicine. The boy began to cry a lot because he understood that his mother would die without medical help. However, the presenter answered him that every day someone dies in the world, so there is nothing special about it. And after that, he returned to the continuation of the show and asked the crowd who still needed medicine. The monsters looked at him emotionlessly, especially after such an act with a little boy. Suddenly, the crowd began to discuss something among themselves and a commotion began. After that, residents began to turn away from the company and leave as the prices there were too expensive for them. The man called the monsters stupid beggars who don't understand anything about business. However, a subordinate tried to calm him down. As it turned out, the host was the director of the company, and his name was Lun. Lieutenant Ma continued to say that those beggars went to the black market to get something. But Lun was surprised by this, because the black market should have been outlawed a long time ago. Then the other answered him that for this, it was necessary to obtain approval from the head of the department and the commander of the department, since the lieutenant did not have such powers. Lun questioned why the lieutenant was still in his position and not promoted to captain earlier in the year. But according to the rumor, it happened due to the intervention of the Chinchu clan. They say that they promoted someone of their own to the captain's place, but Ma has not yet seen who exactly. Director Lun disliked Chinchu, but now he tried not to emphasize it. So I just asked the lieutenant if he knew why they had to do it. And he explained that although Vulcan Street is a home for the poor, it occupies almost half of the entire area of Henshin, and 60% of the population lives there. And different forces are at work inside. Everything that cannot be done in other areas of the city was allowed there. Director Lun knew this, which is why he decided to promote his company there. Because 60% of the population is millions of monsters, and if Luna manages to monopolize the pharmaceutical resources on this street, he will become invincible. But Lieutenant Ma explained to him that dealing with drug dealers in this place is not so easy. Therefore, the director replied that he hoped for his help. He knew that Hayes' past capital was now the deputy captain of the patrol division. So he offered the lieutenant to get a share in his business and become a partner. However, only on the condition that there will be no more black market on Vulcan Street. The lieutenant understood the instruction and bowed low, as an agreement to such conditions. Meanwhile, the poor boy, who never managed to buy medicine for his mother, went home upset. Suddenly, a suspicious guy stopped him on the corner and asked if he needed medicine. The little boy was immediately happy and, of course, agreed, but began to tell what exactly he needed. But that bandit was more interested in whether the boy knew how the opening of the new company went and what about the prices. And the poor man explained that medicines are very expensive there, and even if he buys them, his family will have to eat air. The man understood that the boy urgently needed medicine, so he asked if he had heard anything about generic drugs. The little one didn't understand anything about it, so he asked the older one what it was. He laughed, saying that every child on Vulcan Street should know about non-patent medicines. After that, he explained that generics are fake drugs, which they say help just as well as the real ones, but cost much less. It is clear that it was important for the crime to save funds, so the offer seemed pleasant to him. He showed all his money and said he needed antibiotics for malaria. The boy counted the paper bills and found more change in his pocket. The elder looked at the amount and said that it was not enough, but it would be better if the younger one brought him more. Then the boy fell on his knees in front of the man and began to beg him to help him heal his mother, because he no longer had any money. The trafficker finished smoking a cigarette and looked down on the boy, but he had something to say to him. He still agreed to sell the necessary medicine, albeit for a small amount. The boy immediately wiped the tears from his eyes and began to smile so joyfully for the first time. But as it turned out, everything is not so easy, and the man had his conditions for this agreement. In this state, the little one was ready to do anything to get the medicines and take them to his mother as soon as possible. The man needed a child who would be able to transfer his medicine to the right buyers. The guy didn't know anything about it, but the offer seemed innocent to him. Meanwhile, Roland and Bai Lin were walking down a street that was devoid of human life. It seemed to the young agent that instead of monsters, the roads were full of ghosts who saw no happiness in their existence. There will be homeless people everywhere who had nowhere to sleep, so they had to live on the street under garages. Roland saw a woman who looked like Jia Yu and also had a horn on her forehead. A suspicious man was walking behind her, trying to cover his face and remain unnoticed. It was a thief who was hunting for the bag of the lady in front. In this place, everyone survived as best they could. Roland noticed the bad intention of the thief, so he decided that it was necessary to prevent the criminal situation somehow. However, he did not intervene in time, and the thief grabbed the woman's bag in an attempt to hide as soon as possible. The poor lady began to shout across the street and beg for help with the thief. The man quickly ran through the street and even bypassed the police stationed nearby. The injured lady continued to appeal to all the passers-by to stop the thief, but no one cared about her. Soon she saw two policemen who were calmly smoking in the corner of the store and discussing their business. Their dialogue was about a pass card game where one of them almost lost all his money. A woman ran up to them and pointed out that her bag had been stolen in broad daylight. However, the men had no business. One of them was even indignant that their conversation was interfered with. The victim continued to tell the details of the incident and even indicated where the thief ran. But the policeman told her to go to the inspection office, where she would report the theft and fill out the appropriate report. She did not understand why she could not get help right now because by the time the statement was written, the thief would have time to hide. However, the police said that they are following the procedure, and this will not affect the results of the search, which the woman will be informed about. And then he added that if the lady did not leave them right now, she would be arrested for distracting the police from their work. The poor lady had no choice but to leave, because she clearly could not afford to receive another fine from above. The woman passed through Roland and Bai Lin, who now also had no business with her. After that, the demoness decided to remove the tense situation and asked her friend what impression he had about this place. He did not know what to answer because the last situation left its mark.